It is episode 505 of the Locked On Texas Rangers podcast here in full week one of the, lockout. We're finally in it. I'm ranking 10 pitchers, 10 free agent pitchers that the Rangers should go and get and make a part of their rotation that are remaining on the board whenever free agency is done. All that and more coming up on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On to Texas Rangers. I'm your host, Brice Paterik, here today to talk about free agent pitchers. Yeah, we're not talking much about the lockout. There's nothing new going on. Just as a general rule for the lockout, my lockout policy is going to be, if there's something new to update you on, I will update you on it. If not, which is going to be the case for probably quite a while, I won't say anything about it because, there's no point in saying, hey, they're still locked out. They're still locked out. They're still locked out. But you are locked on to the Texas Rangers. Thank you guys so much for making last week by far the best week in the show's history. If you haven't already, go follow me on Twitter at Brice Paterik, follow the show at Locked On Rangers, and subscribe on YouTube or wherever the heck you get your podcasts. Now, today, I'm breaking down the final remaining free agent options that the Rangers have to fill spots in their rotation. I've said it multiple times, but it bears saying again. The Rangers have basically 2 spots to fill, I think, at least. And they filled one with John Gray. The only 2 starters from last year that I feel very confident are going to be solid options in the rotation are Dane Dunning, who I believe is at this point slots in as the number 2 in your rotation. And then you also have Taylor Hearn, who I feel really confident about being a starting pitcher and staying a starting pitcher. If you don't, then maybe you'll add one more. Or if the Rangers don't, then maybe they'll add one more. And then I believe that final spot in the rotation is going to be split by Colby Allard and Spencer Howard. Mostly Spencer Howard's going to be doing the starting, and I think Colby Allard will be coming out to, help put together as one total starter because, again, Spencer Howard hasn't had a whole lot of experience being a starter, so that's 4 spots in the rotation, so they need at least one more. Or if you are just convinced that what you saw in the 8 starts from Spencer Howard weren't enough, the 21 and the third innings, you're like, all right, well, this is our only return in the Kyle Gibson trade, but we're going to punt on it, then sure, I guess that's a decision that you could make. I don't think they will, but again, the Rangers need at least one more starter, and there are a few good names left on the board. They could make a trade. They have been linked to some Reds players. I did an episode on Friday talking about one of those Reds players in Luis Castillo. If the Rangers made a trade for him, a trade for Joey Gallo, and a trade for Matt Olson to try and contend in 2022, which I don't think they will. Again, I said that at the beginning of the episode. Some people forgot that. They're like, why would they make these trades? I don't think they would. But if they wanted to compete in that season. So I think you need one more guy. I think you're looking for somebody in the middle of the rotation. The things that I think would be most important are, just eating innings, being a solid veteran presence, counting on them for at least 150 to 180 innings. Now, some of these guys you might not be able to, but I think the upside in these guys that are maybe not going to be able to be counted on for 150 to 180 innings, I think their upside in other ways and just pure talent of when they're on the field, on the mound, they're just much better than the rest of these guys. So let's just go ahead and rank these guys. There's a few guys that have been knocked off the board. Obviously, the Rangers weren't getting Kevin Gausman. They weren't getting Max Scherzer. Eduardo Rodriguez got a 5-year deal from Detroit. I didn't think the Rangers were going to go with that. They were linked to Robbie Ray, which I didn't expect. Marcus Stroman also signed a 3-year deal with the Cubs, which I don't really understand. There's also Anthony DeSclafani, who signed a 3-year deal to go back to San Francisco, who I wanted. There's Alex Wood, who signed with San Francisco on a 2-year deal. Rich Hill, at 42, signed with Boston. Steven Matz signed a 4-year deal. Dylan Bundy signed a 1-year deal. Corey Kluber also signed a deal. And one last Rangers guy that I want. Actually, 2 last guys. James Paxton and Jose Quintana both signed deals as well. So there's a lot of guys that are off the board. But my 2 top choices for, from basically the start of the offseason are still there. And let's just go ahead and start with these guys in order. Number one, I feel like you guys can all pretty much guess this. Clayton Kershaw is my number one choice for the Rangers. If they have one free agent pitcher to sign, I want Clayton Kershaw. Now, I know he wasn't exactly healthy towards the back half of last year. He only pitched 121 and 2/3 innings. He's had back injuries, and then he had an elbow injury, which is a little scary, caused him to miss basically the entire back half of the season, and he was out for the playoffs as well. Did not require Tommy John surgery. He has pitched quite a few innings. He's going to be 34 next year. He's pitched 2,454 and 2/3 innings in his major league career, has been in the big leagues since 2008, and was very, very durable coming up until basically this year. This is the first time, well, I guess he did pitch 149 innings in 2016. But other than that, he pitched at least 160 innings from 2009 all the way to 2019. And obviously he didn't do it in 2020 because shortened season. But this guy was the picture of health, the pinnacle of health, the paragon of pitching in the 2010s. This guy was phenomenal, was an all-star every year from 2011. Except for 2018, for some reason. I don't know why you ever make Clayton Kershaw not an all-star. I know he pitched only 161 innings that year, but it's still Clayton freaking Kershaw. He still had a sub-3 ERA. And you're not going to tell me there's like 5 pitchers that were better than him that year. No, there's no way. There's never 5 pitchers that are better than him. He also wasn't an all-star this year. Had a horrendous, for him, 3.55 ERA. That's still an ERA plus of 1.15. So he gave 120 innings last year. If he can give 100 to 130-ish innings this year, I think that would be huge because, again, when he's healthy, he is still one of the best pitchers in baseball. Even in 2020, he had an ERA plus of 2.02. This guy is still at the top of his game. He has had some health problems lately, obviously, but still, he is so stinking good. His work ethic, his meticulousness, his genius in pitch planning and how to attack opposing hitters is unmatched in his generation. And having that around some of these young guys like a Dane Dunning, eventually towards the back half of the season, I think Cole Winn, and just a spring training around Jack Leiter, like that is going to go a huge way, even more than what he's going to do on the mound, which again is going to be fantastic. And also is going to put a bunch of butts in seats. So I think a 3-year, $75-ish million deal is going to be on the table for the Rangers if it's not already on the table already. And if they get him, they might want to get one more starter as well, somebody who is going to get you 150 innings, because again, it's probably going to be a limited year from Taylor Hearn. I know I said that I trust him to be a consistent starter. He did throw 104 innings last year, but before that, I think 110, 120 is the max you can be able to count on him because he hasn't been a starter in so long. Basically since 2019 is the last time that he was a starter. And again, I think you're going to get some pretty quality endings from Dane Dunning. This year he had 117. The Rangers were really careful with him, and I think he can go up to 150, 160 next year. I feel pretty confident in that. He might go higher, and if an injury happens, then he might go lower, but I think they're going to let the chains off of him and let him eat because he was very efficient and, didn't throw that many pitches per start, which is amazing that he got all the way that many innings, but he was just so efficient. I think he can go pretty deep into games, and you're going to get quite a few innings out of John Gray, I believe. So maybe you want one more if you get Clayton Kershaw or this next guy, who's another guy who is just so stinking good that it's ridiculous. But again, has some injury concerns, some arm fatigue that held him back down the stretch. But Carlos Rodon is a guy who I've wanted for a while. He is 28 years old. Actually, I believe is turning 29, and I think it's just a few days, like towards the end of the week, December 10th, if you're keeping track at home. But last year, he was just so stinking good. He's had all this hype around him. I believe he was the number 3 overall pick out of North Carolina State back in 2014. Yes, 3rd overall back then. Has been, inconsistent throughout his career, but really found that next step, had an ERA plus of 183, made his first All-Star game, top 5 in Cy Young voting this year, only 132 in a third innings, but struck out 185. Not even 135 innings, he struck out 185. This guy was on fire. 12.6 strikeouts per 9 innings. He was just dominant. So if you feel good about keeping him healthy, I think a 2-year, if you offer him a 3-year deal, I don't know who else is going to offer him a 3-year deal, so maybe that would be enough to get him here. But again, he has been ridden very hard. I talked with Mike Palucci of D Magazine a few weeks ago. about this guy who he has followed for a long time. He was ridden incredibly hard and suffered a lot of injuries, I think, because of it at North Carolina State. It was ridden hard this year, and they couldn't trust him to come back and be healthy for the postseason. Otherwise, maybe they wouldn't have gotten knocked out by the Houston Astros. I don't know. But anyway, he's a guy who has a lot of talent, and I think that you take a swing on a guy like that when you're in a position where the Rangers are, and if it works out, then you feel really, really great about it. And you have a guy who is the top of your rotation. If John Gray's your number 2 next year, not that I think he's bad, but if he's your number 2, then I feel much better about this rotation than I would if he was your number 1. Not that he can't do it, but again, having that flexibility. Also, Clayton Kershaw would definitely be your number 1 if he's in this rotation next year, whenever he is healthy. But those are my top 2 guys by far. It's going to be less detailed as we go down the list because obviously I'm less enthusiastic about them. But I got number 3 through 4 through 10 coming up. But first, I got to tell you guys about DirecTV. Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friends log in for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all the entertainment that you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. The best part, there is no annual contract, so get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package. And we are back ranking the top 10 remaining free agent pitchers the Rangers should pursue this offseason. Just want to say again, thank you guys for making Locked On Rangers your first listen of the day. Now, I already talked about Carlos Rodon and Clayton Kershaw. This next guy is a right-hander, a guy who has been in the league for quite a while, who actually made his major league debut against the Texas Rangers. That is Michael Pineda, a guy who was a one-time All-Star, actually didn't make an All-Star team, hasn't made an All-Star team in a decade since his first year with Seattle, where he was really solid, 28 games. And in 2011, he was 22 years old back then, 171 innings, 173 strikeouts. This year, pretty solid stuff with Minnesota. He's been with Minnesota for the last 3 seasons. Has been a little better than league average. Last year had a 1.17 ERA plus. The year before that, he had a 1.29 ERA plus. This year in 22 games, 21 starts, 109 innings, 88 strikeouts, a 3.62 ERA. I feel pretty confident the Rangers can get for a pretty good deal. He'll be 32 this upcoming season, and you sign him to a 2 or 3 year deal. I feel pretty confident of that being a worthwhile investment. He kind of fits that mold of guys who the Rangers have had success with, like the Lance Lynns, like the Mike Miners, like the Kyle Gibsons. These guys are right around his age and haven't quite lived up to their potential. Obviously, he made an All-Star his first season and has shown spurts in seasons, but has not been consistent enough to do it. The last contract he got was a 3-year, $28 million offer from Minnesota. Maybe something along those lines would be able to move the needle with him. Maybe just be a 2-year deal worth $20-ish million. He's coming off a fine year, but again, he has been suspended in his past. I believe he was one of the ones who was caught with the sticky stuff, and it had a fine 1.5 WAR season last year, just fine. But I feel confident in getting this guy, and you need guys with that potential, and I think he's one of the ones that the Rangers could make a move on. His fastball isn't quite where it was. It's at 91 last year. The slider is below average velocity as well, at 81, and the changeup is at 86. But he's got his walk percentage is fantastic. He gets people to chase out of the strike zone. His walk percentage is in the top 4% of the league. The chase rate is in the top 4% of the league as well. Fastball spin rate is in the 3rd percentile. Velocity is down. Expected ERA, expected batting average, hard hit percentage, all these things are pretty low. But I feel good about the Rangers being able to turn this around on a cheap deal. Maybe 2 years, $10 million or $20 million is too much. Maybe 2 years, $10 million or 2 years, 14 would get it done with this guy. And they could turn around and make him find that consistency in that form they've done with other players. But again, there's not a whole lot left on this scrap pile of a free agency class. But there is one guy who has been in the league for actually a little longer than Clayton Kershaw, and has been with a hated rival, a guy who I've loved watching pitch for many years, a guy who is very old by pitcher standards, Zach Greinke. He is 38 years old. He's going to be 38 coming into the next season. I know I said multiple times that he just had like a fine year with the Astros last year, but that year last year, that would be great value for the Rangers if he did what he did for the Astros. Last year in his age 37 season, he pitched 171 innings, struck out just 120, but had an ERA plus of 103, had an actual ERA of 416. So that's a little bit above average for 170 innings. A guy who is a veteran presence, another guy whose work ethic and habits and just general brilliant encyclopedic baseball brain would be a huge benefit to guys that don't have elite stuff. Like I think he would do very well for Dane Dunning. Dane Dunning has good stuff. It's not, like Kershaw level crazy. It never was. It was just his meticulous attention to detail, his impeccable command, and him just knowing exactly what the batter thought he was going to do and being able to outthink every single one of them for many, many years. He's won a Cy Young. He has been an All-Star several times in his career, including most recently in 2019. Wasn't an All-Star this year, but was pretty solid veteran presence. I think led the Astros in innings pitched, the team that went to the World Series from the American League. So that's a guy who I think could really help this team, maybe even more so than Michael Pineda. I don't know what kind of a deal he's looking for. Maybe a 1 or 2 year deal. He's not ancient. Obviously, Rich Hill's pitching at 42, which I don't know how, but he still is. He's going to be 38 next season, so a 2 year deal, he's 39. He's still not yet 40 by the end of that deal. Maybe the second half of the deal doesn't look super great, but I think he's a guy who could definitely help this staff. And I don't know how much interest he's going to get from other teams around the league. But again, a guy who has been in the league for a long, long time, maybe even be able to have a good impact on John Gray as well. So yeah, right now he ranks as my number 4 starter that I would like the Rangers to get of these remaining free agent pitchers. And I'm going to tell you about number 5. Number 5 is a lefty. But first, I got to tell you about Built Bar. Yeah, that's right. It's holiday season. You can grab a protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, or maybe even better than a candy bar. It's Built Bar, filled with so much holiday goodness, rich with decadent flavor covered in chocolate, but amazingly low calories, sugar, net carbs, and fat, and high in protein. You get the best of both worlds. It's delicious, and it's healthy. Built Bar gives you the extra fuel you need to bust down those mall doors and battle all the holiday shoppers, or if you're just standing in endless shopping lines, Built Bar can give you that extra something to keep you going. So throw one in your jacket, your purse. You never know when you're gonna need it. Are you friends with Santa? Well, tell Santa to throw in a few Built Bars in that stocking. With so many flavors, they'd make anyone's Christmas a happy one. Want to cozy up to something warm? Here is a holiday secret for you. Dip your Built Bar in some piping hot cup of cocoa and let it melt a little bit to give your beverage that Built Bar flavor. Plus, you'll have a nice melty Built Bar to go with it. Be sure to keep some napkins on hand because it does get a little bit messy, but it's worth the mess. Do you like some of those marshmallowy treats around the holidays? You can get your hands on some Built Bar Puffs. They're light, fluffy, marshmallowy through and through. Different flavors, all covered in chocolate. Tastes so good, you won't believe they are filled with protein. So go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15, and you'll get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Now, we just talked about Zach Greinke, another veteran presence. This guy is coming up, is number 5. Yeah, we're at 5. Oh, goodness. I didn't realize the 10 would be this much. We're going to breeze through the last couple because, honestly, they're just kind of here. Because I needed some room. But anyway, Matthew Boyd is the guy who I have here on this list. He had a really solid season for Detroit last year. I don't know why they just straight up cut him. I felt like he had been on the trading block every year since 1910, but really he only came into the league in 2015, so that's not technically possible, even though if it sounds like it is. He's a lefty who's a veteran who's been a very solid, about league average pitcher for most of his major league career. Obviously, in 2020 didn't go very well for him, or really anybody. He had 12 starts, 60 innings, and a 6.71 ERA. This past year, he had 78 2/3 innings and 15 starts, a 3.89 ERA, struck out 67 batters. So he's not really a big strikeout guy, 8.7 strikeouts per 9 for his career. but a low walk guy at 2.8 walks per nine and a career ERA plus of 90. Last year it was 109, which was a career best for him, so well above average, and a guy who in the past had been very consistent in his innings levels. 185 innings in 2019, 170 in 2018, and in 2017 he had 135. So you're going to get probably at least 150 innings out of this guy. But he's solid. He should be pretty cheap. If Detroit let him go, then he's probably going to be really cheap. So I think the Rangers should definitely take a look at him and just kick the tires and see what's going on with him. His fastball is about league average. He's also got a changeup and a slider and a curveball. They're all about fine. Last year, he was in the top 20% of chase rate, in the top third of baseball in walk percentage, average exit velocity, hard hit percentage. Fastball spin rate is in the 69th percentile, which I think is pretty nice. Curveball is above league average as well. Barrel percentage, slugging, expected slugging, on base, ERA, batting average, all those are right around league average. So like a pretty solid pitcher. I think he's worth an investment of 2 or 3 years. He is still 30, so you can get a few years out of him being about league average, and I think that would be absolutely worth it. Plus, you get another lefty in your rotation if Taylor Hearn does not stick, and I think you need at least one lefty in this rotation. Speaking of lefties, this next one, Tyler Anderson. Guy is another person right around league average. Last year, he spent time in Pittsburgh and Seattle, a little bit better in Pittsburgh than he did in Seattle, because, again, he's facing against the NL. And through 167 innings last year in 2020, he threw just under 60 innings. Didn't have a great 2019, had injuries limited him to just 21 innings, but did throw 176 the year before that. So basically, he's been in Colorado, he's been in Pittsburgh, he's been in Seattle. Why not go to a place that is, I guess Seattle is still kind of a pitcher's haven, not quite as much so. Also pitched with the Giants in 2020 and had just a fine year. Last year had a 2.53 ERA at those two different stops, 134 strikeouts, an ERA plus of 93. So a little below league average, but again, he was just pretty fine. And that's about what you're wanting in this, a guy you can count on, and had a 1.6 WAR according to Baseball Reference last year. So above league average. That's fine. Now let's breeze through these last few guys. Aaron Sanchez, who is a guy whose velocity fell off. He was a little bit higher on this list initially, but last year the velocity was way down, averaged at 90 miles an hour, a 76 mile an hour curveball, and 83 mile an hour changeup. The peripherals on Baseball Savant just don't look great. Fastball spin rate is in the bottom 10%, and if your velocity is in the bottom 10% and your fastball spin rate is in the bottom 10%, that's not great. Curveball is above average, and at least in terms of spin rate, and but overall just not a super strong year for him. Had some promise as a guy who theoretically I liked. A pretty solid year with the Giants. I don't know how he had this much success with those extra numbers. Again, it was a small sample size, only 35 and a third innings, a 135 ERA plus, a 306 actual ERA. But ever since he made his first All-Star team at the age of 23, he's kind of been on a downward slope. I guess if the Giants aren't seriously considering bringing him back, then that might be a red flag of them seeing something in him that he's not quite there anymore. And that might mean, okay, maybe the Rangers don't need to take a look. Now, there are 3 more guys on this list. This is a guy who pitched in the division, Yusei Kikuchi of Japan. He is a left-hander, made his first All-Star team this year. He's been in the league for 3 years. Just a really solid, about average season last year. The back half of the season was not super great to him. The first half was pretty solid. This year finished with a 4.40 ERA in 29 starts, 157 innings. In 2019, he threw for 161 and 2/3 innings. So he's been about league average-ish, a little below for his career. But again, shouldn't be too expensive. He's going to be 31 next year. So maybe a 2-year deal would be enough. Again, he is towards the final 10 of these 10 remaining guys. The Rangers also have an option to trade for somebody on Cincinnati or maybe on the Oakland A's staff before they go to these guys. Also, you have Danny Duffy, who is an option. He would be higher, but I think there's a serious chance that he might consider retirement. He pitched fairly well this year in 60 and a third, or just 61 innings for Kansas City. He's been with Kansas City his entire career, 11 years that is, a 3.95 career ERA in just under 1,200 career innings, an ERA plus of 112. This year had an ERA plus of 184. Yeah, 184. Last year, 94 and 110 the year before that. He's just been a very solid, reliable guy. And I think he could do fairly well in this rotation. He'll be 33 next year, so maybe 1 or 2 year deal. See if he's still good. Had some elbow problems, so that's why he's down so far on this list that he was literally considering retirement. I'm not sure if he's still considering it or who he's got offers from or if he wants to go back to Kansas City. I'd also heard that he'd been receiving interest from some Asian teams that he might consider signing a deal in Japan or in Korea and go finish out his baseball career over there. And one more old guy to finish out this list. We have a right-hander, a guy who has been very fun to watch in his career, very unique style of pitching. That is one Johnny Cueto. Yeah, Johnny Cueto, who has been just bundles of fun. Hans Kraus reminded me of him because he had the little funky little waggle in his delivery, like just a very unique windup, which has always been fun to watch. He's only made 2 All-Star teams, which I don't know how. Like, I really don't know how. He's got 3 top 10 Cy Young finishes, but only 2 All-Star games. His last top 10 Cy Young finish was his first year in San Francisco. That was at the age of 30 in 2016. Now he's going to be 36 this year. Had a just fairly solid 115-ish innings with San Francisco last year. A 4.08 ERA, a exactly 100 ERA plus. So again, if everybody else gets taken on this list, or if you want him to be the second free agent that you sign to help fill out and stabilize this rotation, then I feel like that might be a solid bet. But again, just fine. It's number 10. There's not that many free agents remaining, so don't get your hopes up too much if they sign 2 guys. That I don't think there's going to be that much there. They already got their big fish in John Gray. That is their biggest, unless they get Clayton Kershaw. That is going to be their biggest pitching acquisition, and I think you should feel very good about that because I feel very good about him being in this rotation and leading this rotation into the 2021 season and for the next 4 years because that's how long his deal is. So I think that's a longer deal than any of these guys will sign unless you feel really confident about Carlos Rodon and keeping him healthy. That's the only one that I'd give 4 years. I don't think even Clayton Kershaw would take a 4-year deal. I mean, if he wanted it, then I think you have to consider it. I don't think paying him $25+ million for 4 years is necessarily the best financial idea, but I think it will put some butts in seats, and I don't know that he necessarily wants it. So a 2 to 3 year deal, I think, is what it's going to take for Clayton Kershaw, and I think he is strongly considering the Rangers, even more so now that the Rangers are going to field a fairly competitive team, I should say much more competitive team in the 2022 season, and then hopefully an actually playoff competitive team in 2023. Like they said they would. So, I don't know. They're seeing him do well on their, fulfilling on their promises. And it's just Carlos Rodon's health, I think, is the biggest question about him. So those 2 are obviously my top guys. I talked myself more into Greinke than I thought I would. But again, just eat some innings, be a veteran, be a solid presence around this team. I think that would yield immense value that the Rangers most desperately need. But that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rangers. I'm hoping to get a crossover with one of the Locked On Blue Jays folks to talk about Marcus Semien, the incredible year he had. I'm also going to try and get Grant on this week as well, and maybe another crossover or a special guest later on in the week. We'll see. I will let you know once I know about that special guest coming up later on in this week. But thank you guys so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen of the day. Again, if you're not following me on Twitter, go follow me at Brice Paterik, follow the show at Locked On Rangers, and go subscribe on YouTube because that makes my bosses very happy and me as well. But thank you guys so much for listening to Locked On Rangers. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy baseball.